Hello and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general nonsense for the clinical research community.
Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com.
And now, without further ado, on to the show.
All right, well, it's another Note to File podcast. Denali, how's it going?
It's going all right. I feel like May's been an absolute insane month. But
well, at least it's not even halfway over yet. So,
oh, good.
That going
It
for you.
feels so much better.
Not bury the lead here. Let's welcome our guest, Joe O'Rourke. Joe, how's it going, man?
Roger, thanks so much for having me on. Thanks for bribing me to be here.
I'd say now that we finally were able to save up enough money to pay for your appearance, I'm glad to finally get you scheduled. You're not an easy guy. Not an easy guy to get nailed down.
I appreciate you making sure I get CME for this and that I can continue my education.
That's true. And I hope that you plan on putting it on your CV.
Oh, no doubt.
Update,
actually, right at the top. Yeah.
Full transcript. right to the CV. Very good. Again, welcome everyone. If you're in the comments, got questions for Joe, let's hear them. Otherwise, just want to kick off like we always do and tell us a little bit about, your background in clinical trials. How'd you get in the space? Give us your origin story, if you would.
My supervillain story. So
you said villain, all right? I did not.
I did. Just
okay.
Was mistaken. I was going to be a physiologic researcher. I was very interested in doing metabolic research back a couple of decades ago. And I.
But you're only 25 though.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was I was a kindergarten researcher.
Okay.
I wound up I was a research assistant at Johns Hopkins for a period of time, supporting two types of metabolic research, one with geriatric populations studying wound care and wound healing, and another major research program in basically exercise and, its effects on broad cardiometabolic considerations. And I loved the research. I was going to be a PhD, doctoral metabolic researcher path. And then someone grabbed me by the arm and said, "Don't do it, Joe. You're going to saddle yourself with student loan debt and you're going to chase grants and, a bunch of other things that didn't sound attractive to 22-year-old me at the time." And so I kind of fell backwards into pharma services. Someone told me about a local company that had an entry-level position where I didn't know it at the time, but I was going to investigator meetings, doing investigator training, faxing radar training certificates to investigators afterwards, and getting a great basic education. I was in service delivery there for a few years. I went into patient recruitment. I started recruiting patients for trials. I built an early digital patient recruitment function in 2009, where I was loading ads on Facebook to get people to click. And Facebook called me up one day and said, "You're one of our top 50 advertisers." And I said, "That can't be right. I don't compare to Nike. I'm in a 100-person company. What's going on here?" And I'd spent $2 million in 50 days with them, which at the time was big dollars. And it was extremely effective. And so I built a digital patient recruitment function for a little bit. And then I was asked if I wanted to move into sales of that company because I like to grow our relationships and our work. I said, "No, those people are terrible." And
salespeople, you.
Salespeople.
Yeah, now I'm on a podcast with two of them. So
I'm sorry. We like to surround you and, come in. And then my boss at the time kind of told me to take the weekend and think it over. And I moved into that about 15 years ago. I've been growing kind of clinical trial businesses ever since. That's my background, kind of coming in the industry and then moving into sales and growth roles.
And so you recently, right, moved back to WCG, correct? That's you were there, did a stint at Walgreens, now back at WCG. So what are you doing now?
Yeah, so let me fill you in just a little bit more. Forgive me. Stepping back for a second. So patient recruitment company, I went to another small company that I helped to grow in the measurement science space. They were acquired by WCG in 2016. And I stayed with WCG from 2016 to 2022, got involved in a variety of their, I'll call them portfolio companies, many acquired, some organic. had a great run. And at the end of 22, I was really very, very focused on increasing access to clinical trials for patients. And I saw the opportunity at Walgreens as an opportunity to go do that. So I went there and built that business for 3 years. Great business, by the way, continuing to thrive today, despite rumors to the contrary, which we can address at some point, I'm sure. And then at the end of last year, WCG came to me and said, would you be interested in coming back to talk about the IRB and IBC business? And I thought that was really interesting with what's going on in today's society and the doubt and suspicion around health policy, medical advice, new research and whatnot, to kind of sit the nexus of, patient protection, trust and research and whatnot. So I came back and I'm responsible for the IRB, IBC, commercially responsible for the IRB, IBC, all of our partnerships with sites and institutions, and then a few of the other business lines as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm especially curious, and we don't have to talk about Walgreens specifically, but I think the idea and the sort of huge rise we saw with retail pharmacy, whether I don't know what 5-6 years ago, maybe less than that.
It was a little bit less than that. It was like a little bit after COVID.
Fair,
right?
But either way, it seemed like everybody kind of was throwing their hat in the ring. We all know what happened, with CVS as they kind of either significantly changed or backed out altogether. Man, Walmart sort of came in and maybe they're back in it with Care Access. I can't really tell. Either way, a lot of,
like Kroger was in it. All of those retail pharmacies kind of at least mentioned that they were going to do it, whether they followed through or not.
Which from the outside looking in sounds like kind of a no-brainer, right? It seems like it does make a lot of sense. If you don't, again, from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem like any of the retail pharmacies have significantly they haven't done a lot, I guess. I mean, that's not entirely fair, but certainly haven't grown to the hype that was being thrown out there. Do you think it's is there something inherently difficult about retail pharmacy being in the game? Should they be? Are they doing it wrong? I guess I'm curious for sort of your general thoughts about, the role or lack thereof of retail pharmacy in clinical trials.
So I think there's two different difficulties that kind of have to be split apart, if you will. One is you take a mega corporation with enormous assets of some form or another, and then you create a business that's not part of its core mission tied to those assets. And you go, how does that work? And how does it perform? And how does it, tie back to the mothership, if you will? And some businesses and companies have, had great ideas and said, we're going to start this and revenues are going to shoot through the moon. And, and then they don't actually connect it back to the core of the business. Others don't have a really clear understanding of what is the intrinsic assets that we have here. So if you say, I'm going to take, 30,000 pharmacists who are working 12-hour days and doing their best to serve their patients and everything else, and suddenly make them clinical researchers.
Yeah.
That might look good on a slide somewhere, but that's not going to work.
Yeah, that sounds miserable for everyone. Yes.
If you say, and this was, I can speak specifically to Walgreens in my time there, the concept was they had direct access to 130 million people. They had the access, they knew their prescriptions, they knew some of their medical history, they had other interesting data on them. And they had the ability through the consent framework that you deal with at the point of transaction to directly interact and message those people about research-related activities. And now that was really interesting and novel, and that developed a lot of legs. So it's funny, you made the comment, they haven't really done much, and I'll speak to something that's not public record. So, I get to kind of say it. So Walgreens, BARDA awarded Walgreens a study to design, operate, and run at the same time as they awarded the same study design to a traditional CRO to do the same thing at the same time. And Walgreens stood up 20 novel trial sites faster than the other traditional model. They enrolled 2,500 patients, far faster than the traditional model, and delivered good data quality. And they went head to head with here's a traditional model. Now, it's a very narrow, specific study design,
Right.
but nonetheless, there were a lot of really, really good proof points that came out of that. And I think that was the people knew the assets that they actually had. The people that are at Walgreens still, many of them still there, they knew the assets they had. They knew the capabilities that they could deliver. They knew what they needed to outsource and rely upon other people to do rather than like try and do themselves. They were all experienced clinical researchers who would like run site networks, run other businesses historically. And that made, I think, all the difference in the world. But each of those is kind of like, where does it tie back to the success of the overall business? And how intrinsic is that? The other part is people think of big companies as having deep pockets. I started at Walgreens. I think our public stock at the time went down like 75% in 2 years. There were no deep pockets. We were bootstrapping that business for all intents and purposes, kind of figuring out how to, represent ourselves with integrity, number one, and not say like we're going to do things we couldn't deliver. But also then, we were not relied upon anyone else to pay as you go. We had to, eat what we not kill. That's the wrong expression, but you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, fair.
Because I've always thought the organizations, like Walgreens or like CVS, like were really well positioned for a very limited subset of participating in research. Like some of those trials, like vaccine type research, where you want DCT, broad populations, easy to administer studies. You're not going to do like infusions and that type of thing. Yeah. The other thing that I always there's actually a couple things that I thought could have been really cool to see, which I just never heard of it. Maybe it is happening. But I always thought that like an organization like that, you have so much data that'd be phenomenal from a recruitment perspective to be able to truly like expose patients to trials who wouldn't be in the pop, because you have medications, you have some of their refill, histories, all of that. Is that a place that you saw those people playing? Because I feel like that could be a really powerful and especially increasing access to trials for folks who aren't in the standard major medical centers doing research.
One of my favorite ones was in 2023, there was a study that we were asked to recruit for where patients had 5 days from the point of getting a prescription to enroll. Like that was the entire enrollment window. The first time they were ever on this drug until enrollment window closed, or eligibility closed, I should say, was, 120 hours. And so we were able to kind of pinpoint them. The moment they got a prescription, they were getting a text message from us saying, hey, would you like to participate in this trial? It's for people who are picking up this prescription for the first time. And it's if you take this and your symptoms get better and then they get worse again, now you're eligible. And we were wildly successful in that compared to many other different modalities. But to your point, so much about research is like the fit for purpose, the design for something. It's not a good fit for, complex oncology trials, or most oncology trials, let's be frank, infusion therapies, acute hospitalized situations, stroke, things like that. It's not a good fit for that. But then on the flip side of that, you have the whole world of, to your point, like you've got vaccines, you've got early cancer detection, which is based upon like liquid biopsy, blood, and then collecting medical records on the individuals to say, like, what did that colonoscopy say that, takes place 45 days later, and comparing those and validating this new diagnostic is good versus the gold standard diagnostic tool that's in place today, cardiometabolic conditions that are simple trial designs. Even like you start to get into more fragile patient populations like significant asthma, COPD, it's still a chronic ambulatory condition that's able to interact with a pharmacy in some way, shape, or form. And that's why I'm saying it's like one of my big issues with this whole state of the industry was everyone would represent their solution as like the silver bullet to all the industry's problems. Like, like narrow the focus. There's a specific set of problems that each solution can be good for. And if you can kind of like nail that down, number one, you become more credible. And number two, you're actually applying your assets against a relevant challenge rather than like, let's be everything to everyone.
Why didn't we just straight up see retail pharmacy as central recruitment vendor? That seems, or did we? And maybe I just wasn't aware of it.
Walgreens was, during my time there at least, and I spoke to the person leading the business, who's phenomenal, to kind of get a recent read before talking with you guys because I figured Walgreens would come up at some point. Walgreens tried to simultaneously launch kind of 3 separate businesses: patient recruitment, trial conduct, operating the study site, and real world evidence. And the patient recruitment business was always the one that was like the fastest, the most clean cut, and the one that kind of, during my tenure there, advanced the furthest. Conduct's hard, it's risky, it's complicated. And that did a lot of great work as well, just to be clear. And then real world evidence was like all about kind of the product fit. There was some really interesting work that we were doing around HIV prevention and like what are the barriers that prior authorization presents to getting and receiving HIV PrEP, and therefore preventing the spread of HIV. Educational aspects around like how do you reduce asthma exacerbations that result in hospitalizations. Like we could support really interesting novel research there in a different way. But at the end of it, it was like it went back to patient access. Who can you access, message, your trusted voice, and they act on it. And like wherever that center point was, wherever that had a strong center of gravity for a pharmacy, good things were happening.
That makes sense. And I mean, related, but maybe tangentially, and also maybe a segue, something later. So, even if you have let's say, by all means, a successful clinical trial operations within retail pharmacy. I mean, look, the big guys that we're talking about here, is that really going to be such a financial, of such financial interest to them anyways? In an industry, we know it's hard to get paid. It's hard to do enough at volume for that to add up to a lot. And these companies are not, I mean, maybe, they don't have deep pockets, but they also make a shitload of money across, their other areas. I mean, they have PBMs and they're much bigger than, a store on the corner. So even if they are successful, and then you've got, say, where the segue potentially comes in is now private equity comes in. We know that they took over or had some big part in Walgreens over the last year and a half. Private equity loves to help people. That's what they're all about. Not trying to squeeze money out of, as much money as they can out of an organization. I'm saying, does it become a sort of just not under the value system of some of these, large retail pharmacy? And I don't mean that in a completely negative way. I just mean, look, we know the point of PE is to make money. In clinical trials, operationalizing clinical trials, it's hard to make money. I mean, I assume there's a reason that's why you don't see a ton of, or any, publicly traded clinical research sites. I mean, they're not, I guess, Science 37, but we know how that went.
So what is your question?
I guess my question is,
my connection got a little wonky.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. I'm a little breaking up a little bit too.
Okay.
Does even a successful clinical trial operation not move the needle enough in a large, retail pharmacy setting? Like, let's say again, even if you did a great job, is it really not going to be enough to excite the powers that be to keep it going indefinitely?
I think it comes down to expectations. And I don't mean that in a more broad, like in some sort of dramatic way. Walgreens was, this is personal commentary. Like there's no full, professional hat off. Walgreens, when it was taken private by Sycamore in August, September of last year, Walgreens was basically having something like top line revenue of, 130 or 150 billion a year, and they were not making a profit. Like really kind of contemplate that and go, you've got, thousands and thousands of stores, hundreds of thousands of employees, tens of thousands of pharmacists, and struggling to churn a profit on it because of the nature of today's all sorts of complex dynamics, which I won't get into. But my point there is, if you've got an internal initiative in a business that's generating, 10 million of profit annually, and it lifts your profile and it presents more opportunities to your patients, and it's seen positively by your business and by your pharmacists, and it's seen something beneficial to the communities that you serve, I got to tell you, like I personally had the pleasure of interacting with CEO of Walgreens at different times, president of the division that I was in. They were all in. They were extremely supportive. I can't speak for every company that's out there, but even at a private equity level, I've had a wide variety of experience in that domain. They're very supportive if it does those things.
Sure.
But if it's like someone's fun project and it's spending money and the broader company's not doing well, no, those things do get shut down.
So obviously there were rumors around what was happening with Walgreens. Things were changing, right? And we got sort of chirps about that throughout the space a couple weeks back. And you said those rumors were incorrect. Can you share more?
I don't work for Walgreens anymore. I left there, whatever it's been, 6 months ago now.
Yep.
So here's what I'll share with a degree of confidence, having spoken to people who work there right now. I read an article by a reputable, industry news leader saying this is a rumor, but here's a bunch of quotes from people talking about it shutting down. That's really hard on that type of business and all the people who work there. When I came in 2023, the first question was, how do I know if you guys are real? And then CDS shut down its clinical trials business very publicly in May of 23. And for 2 years, I grew that business where every conversation started with, how do I know you guys aren't going to shut down? And then the rumor mill, and then everything else. And I just want to take a minute and say, there's a lot of people there who I worked with, people who I brought in there, people who are still there today. That's really hard to constantly have that hanging over your head where you got to deal with those conversations and those doubts about, is your business legitimate, while also trying to build a career and doing good work there. From the conversations that I've had recently, the business is continuing on with a great focus on all the areas that I just talked about a little bit ago. I'm sure it's undergoing changes. Because I don't work there and I haven't worked there in 6 months, I can't speak to the extent of those changes with any confidence. But I know they're in, and they're not going away.
So it's interesting. And Brett, I think working with sites across over the past, decade or however long I've been doing this, I think there is that sort of element of sites having to prove themselves, especially novel sites. You're talking about the large AMCs, everyone's kind of yeah, okay, great. You do research. Yes, we know Johns Hopkins, Dukes. You're doing research, not a question, trusted. That's why you get so many trials. But I feel like that's a really common undertone for sites in general, whether it be networks, independent sites, where you have to prove yourself. So being research naive, it becomes a detriment. Yeah. So is that a universal, taking out the big AMCs and big dogs? Is that a universal site experience?
I mean, yeah, of course.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, no, I would say, it definitely is. I mean, if anything, I would have to think it would be a little easier with the, household name, backing you. Although, to be honest, no job. Look, this is a reason, I work for myself. In my mind, no job is safe, really. They can be fired at the whim of anyone at any time. So, that is what it is. And look, I know there's great people that work in these organizations. I can appreciate that. Also, Walgreens could just say anything to, at least help provide some clarity, I think, since there seems to be enough talk that it seems like something's going on. But again, neither here nor there. I just found it interesting because it seemed like enough talking. And I think it's something that, look, again, I think on the surface, it's a good idea. I think it's really hard to operationalize these things, as we've covered.
Yeah.
I would love to see it succeed, to the degree that it can. I think it's just a fascinating thing to watch. And I think, again, being a sort of at the site level, I hate to use the word skeptical but maybe that's accurate. Just know that it can be very hard. It can be very hard to do. So to be fair, I'm rooting for these companies. I'm interested to know because frankly, I'm in the same shit that they are. I'm also trying to run sites. Hey man, what happened? What are you guys doing or not done? Or what's not worked for you? What can we all learn from each other? I doubt we'll ever get that from these large organizations. And that's okay. But I wish there was some more transparency around it.
I would share case studies of 3 case studies. And it would be 1 success, 1 middling with lessons learned, and 1 failure. Because it was, to me, it's if you're not sharing your failures and the things that you've tried and not succeeded along the way, you lose credibility.
Sure.
If you're nothing but glowing reviews of unnamed studies and unnamed sponsors and whatnot, it's is that really credible? especially in a space where so many entrants have come in and been like, we're the next best thing.
Yeah.
You know, Denali, actually at the beginning, you guys brought up, Walgreens went into the clinical trial space in 2012 and exited in 2015. Like when I took the job in 22, I brought that up. Like you know, you've gone before. There's a lot of like you build on the steps and the good work that people have done before you. But you know, to me, it's not about like a big company and whatnot. It's like, what do you actually have, and can you actually activate it for benefit of research? And if you can, then prove it. You both brought up novel sites, research naive sites. So I found this really fascinating dynamic. Like the industry does not have enough experience, proven, credible sites to support all the research needs that exist, especially in various areas. Like full stop. It doesn't. There's not enough. And so you would think there'd be like a natural program that is widely accepted to like, we're going to take really good clinicians who are doing good work and have access to the patients that we need, and we're going to help bring them into the research infrastructure. And not only was there not that, but I'd have like a novel research location in Boston or Chicago. And I'd have a clinical research experience, PI, sub-I, and CRC. And people be like, well, show me how much research you've done at that site. I'm like, it's new. None. They're like, well, we can't bring on a novel site. I'm like, what makes a site? Is it the physical location or is it the research? Like which is it? And I'm bringing that up not because I don't get, you know, they want to make sure high quality research is done there and there's not going to be any GCP violations and whatnot. But the system is set up to embrace those with the most experience, rather than recognize that the supply chain of good high quality sites is a little short of what is needed. And like, here's how we bring in new researchers who want to support it. And to your point, pay them on time and don't make CTA negotiations extremely painful and all the other things that are kind of set up against sites today.
I mean, and that's a problem now that's only going to get worse. I mean, I think if we do see, you know, the hype of AI that does push, you know, especially drug discovery, like we're going to need more sites to do more stuff. We're going to have a huge bottleneck. Like we can discover all the drugs we want, but if we can't run the trials, then, you know,
what we're
gonna have problems.
We'll just take the data from the sites and give it right to the FDA, and that will solve it.
Just in real time.
In real time.
Just not going to be enough sites to give the data away.
That's not going to work. No, okay.
Well, you know, we got a lot of problems to face. I mean, look, I hate to say that it's somewhat, you know, maybe misery loves company. Like if Walgreens was struggling with the same problem, then it makes me feel a little less bad as a smaller independent site who often struggles with the same problem. So it's an industry thing. I think it's something we do have to solve sooner rather than later.
How do we solve it then? I mean, I think it's more of it's a mindset shift. Does it need a solution, or is it rather just like we need to change how we think about things as an industry, less like we need to do something differently?
I mean, some sponsors are better than others. Some are more willing than others, but at the end of the day, it's going to affect them. So they've got to be the ones to be more open to letting naive sites on.
We've talked about this too, where it's interesting, where like pharma, for having their entire business model be based on a lottery system of drugs that may or may not be effective, they're very risk adverse.
Yeah.
For taking that stuff on.
There was a large CRO that I worked with a year or two ago who said they had a program where they were committed to something. I forget the number. I'm just going to make up a number here, but like 10% of the sites on their trials were going to be novel sites.
Yeah.
And they were putting in like a programmatic element to support them. And it's not enough to put the whole trial at risk, but it's like a constant focus on bringing in novel sites. And I thought that was really interesting. You know, build it into the planning, plan for this rather than make it be a surprise that comes later on. Or rather than it come down to like site selection time. And I don't know how much either of you have been on this side of it, but like site selection time, and people are just like, no, I'm not comfortable with that site. Doesn't meet my criteria. Like establish that rubric of criteria up front that you're willing to accept and just go at it. And don't invite sites that don't meet that criteria to submit a feasibility questionnaire and invest their time there either.
Yeah, but and again, that's mostly opaque to sites. We have no idea. We're filling out FQs, but I don't know what we're really being judged on. Because I've said, yeah, we're naive and we've gotten awards, and I've filled out stuff for where maybe they have a little bit of experience, but that's still not enough, depending on the sponsor and their specific requirement. But I look at what you say. I've talked to some groups who are making a concerted effort to include more novel sites. And to your point, a small group, but nonetheless, over time, hopefully that keeps getting more and more new sites in. Worked with a couple bigger, mostly on the oncology side, that would, sort of vet your doctor, put them through a little bit of a training program, and then start giving them clinical trial opportunities from there. So, it's maybe a little too sparse, more sparse than it should be, but at least there's a little bit of movement in that area. So I'll take it. I'll take any wins we can get, even the little bitty ones.
To me, you're kind of speaking to it, but that's such a need. It's actually something I'm personally passionate about, is just making more resources available to sites that can help guide them on. You've been a huge part of it for as long as I've known you, at least. It's kind of talking about what resources are out there. How should people think about this? Because it's not a space that is easy for good clinicians who want to get into the practice to go into and be successful and sustainable at. The flip side is there's major institutions that are running massive amounts of research that are literally doing it at a loss because they don't I see your face now, so I'll pause there. But my point is, it's not easy for anyone to operate as a research center, whether it's their first or their 500th, and do so consistently, sustainably, scalably. It is really challenging. And it's why I'm a big believer in, to your point, sharing information, sharing best practices, sharing tools, sharing things that have worked, sharing things that have been a disaster, and trying to set up sites of all shapes and sizes for better success.
Well, it's the reason I laughed, because I was just having a conversation earlier this week about specifically large sites, and they're I will not name who I'm talking about here, but you talk to enough sites, even the large, super established ones will still be off the record, transparent about, we're leaving 7 figures on the table because we just, from their invoicing financials perspective, and or they don't even know if they're operating in the red or the black because they don't have proper accounting for research. I think even at the large scale, for the ones that are trusted and constantly selected, they're actual it's still a constant challenge, and especially now with the changes in the funding landscape for these organizations who've been so dependent on NIH and IIT and grant-funded research, to now have to realize that they now have to be a little bit more financially viable, right, and cognizant of what they're doing. And even those larger organizations are struggling significantly in that space, which I find it's a universal truth. Research sites struggle, it seems.
I had this conversation recently with someone who used to run research at a large university, and we're going to be doing something to dramatically speed up startup at I'll just call it a large site network for the sake of convenience. And I was trying to get to okay, there's a lot of excitement, yada yada. I'm but why? Yes, I view faster startup and easier startup as a universal beneficial thing, but why are you so excited about it? And this person gave me a great, masterclass of an anecdote, which was, at my university, if I started up in oncology and I ran a trial, 9-10 month startup period, and I ran a trial and I enrolled 1 patient before they closed enrollment, I was losing money. But if I enrolled 2, I was breaking even maybe, and 3, it was a good trial for us financially. And it all came down to, did we start up in 3 months, or did we start up in 9 months or 10 months or whatnot? And that really hit me in a different perspective. I view faster startup so much tied to overall study success and being more attractive to be selected for studies and all sorts of other things. But going down to an N of 1 and going to, a large university that does a lot of research with good accounting, to your point, Denali, and they're actually watching their finances and going, yeah, when we're a pain and we're slow, it's the difference between financial viability, or people are losing jobs and things are getting shut down.
So I guess I should kind of for both of you is like, what's the determinants between like what would cause a study to be really quick and like great, fast startup versus a study having really slow startup? Like, what are the key differences that you'd see that would like drive fast or slow study startup?
I mean, a lot is frankly how easy or difficult the sponsor is to work with sometimes. And some of it's not even them directly. It can be that there's again, a lot of times we're just shuffling emails back and forth. I wish there were we're doing this more organized fashion, like via platform. A lot of times that's the biggest one. A lot of times getting them to just respond to our, budget negotiation requests and things like this. I'm small. I can go very fast. Like literally I can get you everything back in a day. But if we're waiting on somebody to, especially a CRO, and I don't know how well this is known, I may be wrong, but this is my understanding, is like some of these CROs are obligated to do at least 3 rounds of negotiation before they ever escalate it to a sponsor. So essentially now you're playing a checklist game with the CRO. You've got to negotiate 3 to 5 rounds before they'll then escalate it for them to get approval. So you're playing this long game of, and look, like every job, I mean, some people are really on top of their stuff and fast. Some take longer than others. That team is completely removed from like the regulatory team that's helping us make sure we get our regulatory documents together. There's no communication there sometimes. So I still think it's a lot of siloing of the processes.
Yeah. I had, without getting into the who's, I had an escalation last month. So I work with sponsors and CROs and sites on IRB and IBC, and I do other things. And then over here, I work with sites directly. And one of the things that my teams do, I should say, is they negotiate contracts and budgets for sites on behalf of sites with sponsors and CROs. And last night there was a sponsor who escalated and asked for kind of like, hey, this is dragging out, it's taking too long, there's problems and whatnot. And I have spent part of today kind of trying to understand the underlying issues. And one of it was like, there's a difference of 3% on overhead. And I went and I saw when was things communicated, and it was like 4 months of back and forth was over 3% on overhead on a trial. I mean, I know that's like, a little anecdote here, but you're nodding along, Brad, and we both probably seen this before many times. It's like, how long, and you put that at an industrial scale level and you go, how much time is just lost over things like a couple of percent on overhead, the fees, and the overall negotiation. And that's just the budget side. That's not even the contract side, the term side. So your point, or fast. And then I've seen the flip side.
I also wonder too, like if you think about that 3% and you're doing this back and forth for 4 months, how much does it cost? How much is it costing to do that back and forth from a time perspective? And is that probably more than the 3% that you would have just paid?
Well, I mean, then just to Joe's point earlier, like if I would rather have been screening patients for those 3 months, because the 3% I probably care a whole lot less about, because I've enrolled 3 patients during that time instead of the study closing. 2 months after I'm done, I didn't have time to screen anybody, and then all of that was for naught.
So presumably also sponsors and CROs want to get study startup more quickly because they want to get the patients and they want to get the data. So then why are we stuck in this reality where sites want to go faster and complain about it, and sponsors and CROs want to go faster and complain about it? Then we're still here talking about it.
Well, dude, I mean, again, I don't want to get too tin hat with things, aluminum foil hat, but like I really do think, like, I mean, I don't think CROs are necessarily that interested in efficiency. Because again, just like that, if they want to earn their money, they're going to do as many rounds of contract negotiation as they can. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure they're as interested in efficiency probably as a sponsor is. And that's not to say there's some they're doing it all on purpose, to drag things out further and get more money. But I think there's a little bit of little misalignment of incentives, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think there's a lot of legacy process. I don't at an interest level, I've seen CROs work incredibly hard to shave 2 weeks off study startup, a week off study startup, 3 days off study startup. So, at a, I don't know, executive interest level or study startup team interest level, they'll work their butts off to shave a couple of days. But then there's, to your point, there's like process and SOPs that need to be followed, which some organizations have done a phenomenal job streamlining that, and others have not, to your point. I've been on the site side now. I've contracted as a site. I'm supporting sites now, and then I've also worked on the sponsor side, or at least supporting the sponsor and service side. And I've seen kind of all three sides of it, and it is like there's so much good intention, if you will, but then there's also often just the buried in bureaucracy processes that people have a really hard time getting by. You made a comment earlier. You're a small shop. You can move fast. Well, ramp that up to 100 Brad Hightowers and say, we all need to do things the same way under, Hightower SOP. How do you do it? How do you, can you move as fast, or is that?
The truth is, at least for me, I don't. And this is where like it's an advantage in some ways for me, but it makes it a pain is that, you're dealing with this one sponsor and their SOPs and their weird ways and their legacy stuff. That's one sponsor.
Yes.
You got to do that with 100 sponsors or 100 CROs. There aren't 100 CROs probably, but you get my point. Like you don't just do that once, you do it every time, and it's different every time. So we're having to sort of figure out, okay, well, what can we push back on? What's negotiable? What's not negotiable? What dumb stuff do we just have to suck up and do? And again, that's not clear. I mean, hell, that can be this different with the same sponsor sometimes, even depending on what team of people you're dealing with. So the lack of standards there make it very challenging. Something I do, like people might throw rotten tomatoes at me, but I mean, for the most part, I try to make things as easy as I can in working with the sponsor. So sometimes I do a lot of dumb stuff, but it gets me done quicker. It makes them happy. We're done faster. We're small. That's what we're here for. You're paying me. Sure. You want me to do some dumb thing and you're going to pay me for it? Great. Let's do it. I'm not spending months and months challenging on some things that bigger sites may because we have SOPs. I'm not interested in writing SOPs. I'm interested in doing research. So I try to do, things as quickly as possible, which keeps us, staying lean can be an advantage if you use it that way. Well, you don't want 100 Brad Hightowers, I'll tell you that.
No,
I mean, SOPs. Sounds like a lot.
no SOPs. Some of these things. Yeah, let's hit a couple of comments really quick. For us is from shout out Chanela Garcia. Delayed startup times significantly impact site enrollment, but navigating CRO sponsor negotiations, regulatory startup requirements adds additional complexity and delays. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Yeah, we should just
shout out to Chanela, by the way.
Restating there. I don't know Chanela, but
yeah, she's good people.
Thanks for commenting. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's really easy not to understand just the minutia that's involved in these processes. And then each little thing has its own 10 ways of accomplishing it, depending on how the site wants to do it or the sponsor or the CRO who's hired by the sponsor. And then everyone is sort of in this nebulous world of, trying to figure out how each person wants the thing accomplished. Again, lack of standardization. I
was going to say perhaps some standardization for the sites.
And I think there's a lot of entities out there trying to do that. I mean, WCG has a site network, which is basically a front door to say, we'll present you with studies and you have to agree to like, here's, one standard CTA and we'll negotiate the budgets on your behalf and et cetera, specifically to just like take that burden off of sites because it's so burdensome, to your point. And there's others that do similar things, but the entire point is, like you're saying, like you going across industry and doing this unique one-off to every organization. It's so painful. It's funny. It's like the polar opposite side of it, but not polar opposite. On the IRB front, I'm seeing like all the different ways an informed consent form has to be dealt with at a nation level, US level, not even global level of like, okay, here's the template, but then also here's all the localized variations and versions that different sites require to be consistent with how they need to consent patients.
Yeah.
And all that needs to be carefully negotiated and back and forth and edited and pre-reviewed sometimes, and then IRB approved. And it is such a source of like, it's not about how long did it take the protocol to be reviewed. It's about how do you streamline all that. That's an ICF. That's a singular document. It's a critical document, but it's a singular document in the broader ecosystem of startup. And, you know, if we can make that complex, we can make so many other things so complex too.
Yeah, and you know, I worked at a local IRB for years and years. I didn't work at the IRB, I worked with the local IRB. And dude, getting those consent forms negotiated between a local IRB, I got to go back to the sponsor to get that approved. Okay, that's good. Back to the IRB. Well, we don't quite like it. I mean, again, to your point, that's one document.
Yeah.
That should be generally the same across sites, and that alone could take 6 months or more to get negotiated. You know, it's been a while, but I mean, I hear people who still have the same problem to this day.
That
sounds like a local IRB, Brian.
Yeah.
So I hear that.
I was going to say, like, that's literally why I got out of research, because going back and forth with the IRB, doing rewriting of stuff, like well before I launched into the vendor side of things, but it was just like, I was like, the bureaucracy here is too fucking much. I'm not doing it.
I don't blame you. Well, listen, I want to have you back because actually we didn't really even hardly get into IRB. There's a lot of IRB stuff I want to ask you about. Like a large, it's a cornucopia of questions that I want to ask you about IRBs, but I do have to cut us just a little bit short today. Joe.
I will bring the cornucopia next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe, always a pleasure.
Same.
We will not be back Tuesday.
Next Thursday?
We'll be back next Thursday. That's right.
We'll see.
It's still May, so no promises.
No.
We'll be back when we feel like it, guys.
Maybe Thursday next week.
That's right. All right. Joe, thanks again.
Thank you.
And let's get you again. I want to get you back. I have some IRB stuff I want to talk about.
Let's do it.
All right. Cool.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Note to File. We're committed to continuing to bring you independent and unfiltered coverage of the clinical trial industry.
We want to talk about what you want to hear. So if you have something on your mind, hit us up at notetofilepodcast.com.